Hello and welcome to Out of Spec Renew. I'm Tollak and today I'm at ReVolt Systems in Oceanside, California with Eddie and Snow. And today we're going to take a look at Tim Allen's 1934 Ford Victoria EV conversion. Let's get into it. Okay guys, so this car has been out there for a while. Tim has been on this project for many years now. So how did you guys get into this?
Well, I was actually contacted directly by Tim, and he basically asked to help with this EV. Like you said, it's been kind of an ongoing project for quite some time. Had some antiquated systems in it, and we were pretty much brought on to see what we would think and what we could do for him. So basically, we started over with the car and said, okay, let's pull out the old motors and the old technology and put in the state-of-the-art stuff that we have that we know works. I do not like rebuilding people's projects, and that's not what we like to do here. So starting from scratch is always easier than trying to fix somebody else's mess. Bodie Stroud actually built this car. Amazing work by Bodie. He is a really great car builder, knows a lot of stuff about cars. So here we are with this beautiful gem in front of us. He also reached out and said, look, he doesn't do EV stuff. There's not a lot of people that do. So we've been working with Bodie and the rest of the crew. And it's been a very fun project. It's a lot of things kind of popped up when we were getting into it. Of course, like anything else, there's scope creep and there's little gotchas everywhere. But this is a fully running car. It's fully programmed. We drove it yesterday. We're delivering it to Tim next week, right?
Next week, yeah.
Yep, so she's a runner. Bodie's gonna go in and do all the fit and finish on the car. And if you guys want, we'll take you through the entire build and show you what we did.
All right, let's take a look.
This came into us as a rolling chassis with the body on it.
That's right. No motor, no radiator, and no wiring whatsoever in it. So yeah, and I want to give a big shout out to Matty, who's done a phenomenal job on putting this car together. So he spent countless hours working on this.
Also too, Al from AVS Fabrication, a really good friend of ours across the street. Al does a lot of fab stuff for us. He builds beautiful cars. He did Grand National Road Assure last year, got second place.
Classy coupe.
Yep, gorgeous car. This guy is a perfectionist. We did ask Al to kind of come in and help us with this build. He fabricated the motor mounts, the rear cross member mounts. We try to do like minimally invasive stuff with this car because it did come in painted. The chassis was already powder coated, but we did have to add some motor mounts to this vehicle. And Al kind of went with the same theme that Bodie Stroud put into this vehicle. So Bodie has a certain style. Every fabricator has a certain style of building stuff. Al tried to build things the way Bodie did, so you can't tell where Bodie started and left off and where Al did the same thing. So the flow of the car stays the same from a construction point and fabrication point. And then we went in, dropped the motor in. This is the first motor we painted.
Yep. So I've built we're working on motor number 30, so I've built many of these, and this is the first one that's ever been painted. So the motor, if you look here, the motor is pinstriped and detailed to match the rest of the car, and that was done by our guys over at Hot Dog Customs. So Hot Dog, big shout out because that thing looks great.
Yep. So once again, everything in this vehicle is custom built, from the cooling systems. We have Maddie just joined us.
Hey.
That is the Wheeling Welshman. So we have how many CAN networks in this vehicle?
4 plus an ISOSPI network.
So 5 total networks running through the ISOSPI controls all the batteries and BMSs and the masters and everything else together. Also, Maddie went through and we designed the cooling system for this car. There's 2 separate cooling systems, 3 actual cooling systems in the car, 1 for the motor and inverter, also the charger, and then there's a whole battery cooling system as well to cool and warm up the batteries. So that's all been kind of encompassed in this vehicle.
And now, speaking of batteries, another big shout out to Slick Will at Buckwired, because he helped Eddie B design these battery boxes, and there are 5 of these in the car.
Yep.
So that's another really big help.
Yeah, so speaking of batteries, what is this system that went in terms of modules, kilowatt hours, everything?
So when we got the vehicle, it already had an 85 kilowatt pack from a Model S inside of it. Bodie fabricated where the boxes were going to go. We did some structural redesign on some of the boxes that we found that needed a little bit more support, but he already had most of the batteries in the car. They were set up for a 150 volt system. We had to bump that up to a 400, so basically some of them were running in parallel. We put everything in series, added one more module to it, and now we're sitting the whole full 400 volt, all 16 of an 85 kilowatt pack are in this. We don't quite configure them like Tesla does in the floorboards. These are spread out through the entire car. There's, as you can see, the front cowl's been designed by Bodie to house these. They're underneath the seats, they're behind the seats, they're in the trunk, they're absolutely like scattered throughout the car. And they are cooled by a liquid. One of the great ideas that the Welshman came up with is like, hey, remember that dielectric fluid you use for testing batteries? I said, yeah. He goes, why don't we put that through the coolant loop? That way, if it ever does leak, God forbid, it's a dielectric. So that means it's not going to catch fire, it's not going to short out the batteries, and it keeps everything pretty much happy.
So what we got here is a dielectric coolant. So a big concern a lot of people have with conversions is you got a lot of battery fittings, you got a lot of potential leak points. We've smoke tested this thing, blown smoke through the whole thing to make sure it doesn't leak. But even if it does, this stuff isn't going to hurt your batteries at all. You're just going to get basically baby oil like stuff in the bottom of your pack. It won't short anything out, it's not going to corrode your batteries. So this is the first car we've used it on, we're pretty excited with it. Having that little safety net to fall back on of, first of all, it's a little more viscous, so any leak is going to be slower, and second of all, it doesn't hurt anything.
No, and it's non-toxic. Also, you're talking about 16 modules. You have an inlet and outlet, so that's 32 inlet and outlets on each of these, for the full battery pack. Then all your 90s, all your manifolds, all your connections. Just on the radiator up here, we got 1, 2, 3, 4 leak points. So when you're designing these things, always keep in mind simplicity and how many AN fittings. You guys have dealt with ANs, they're kind of a pain. They don't always not leak. They do leak, so you got to go in there, check everything, test everything. We've been running this car for days and days and days. When we come in, pumps go on. When we leave the shop, we turn the car off. Therefore, we know that this car has 100 hours of the pumps running without any leaks, problems, or issues before we even deliver it to the client.
Yeah, so what we did is we put clear hoses on some of these manifolds, and the reason for that is not because they just look cool, but we could actually see the fluid purging through it the first time we run the systems. There's a lot of air pockets in here, so we want to make sure that everything is flowing correctly. This is a pretty crucial part of the car, is all the battery cooling and thermal management. So it's nice to have clear hoses on things so we can kind of take a look into it. These are also silicone too, so they're high temp. They can withstand a lot of different types of chemicals and everything else, so very flexible. Good stuff there. And very flexible. They don't kink. If you have to get them in a tight spot, they're not going to close out on you. So once again, proper prior planning prevents piss poor performance.
How many P's is that?
I don't know. More than one. All of them.
And those batteries are powering what motor?
So this is our Snow.
All right, well, come on
This
back
is our
here.
Snow.
Come on back here and I'll show you exactly what that battery is powering. So what we have here is a ReVolt CR43 Bravo, CR43B if you're going to order that online. Now, what we have here is we started out with a Tesla large drive unit. And so, thanks to Eddie B and his designs, he has taken this motor and turned it from normally it would sit in the car that way. Well, yep.
Wheels, right?
Yep. And Eddie B has designed it so that we can turn it longitudinal just like you would a standard LS, V8, 302, whatever. So here inside this can, which I'm sure you'll notice looks like the cylinder of Eddie B's 357, that houses the inverter. And then you have your 400 volts, comes in here as DC. Our inverter turns that to AC, and that AC exits here into the motor, turns the motor, which actually turns a shaft that turns this torque box provided to us by Torque Trends, and Mitch and his guys over there have done a great job on doing that. So this particular one is a 2-to-1 step down, which is a torque multiplier. So rather than have a transmission, we have a single speed torque box, and that goes to a slip yoke that goes to the drive shaft, turns the wheels, everything else is just like a normal ICE engine.
It's just a fit anywhere
Yep.
that you have an ICE, Chevy 350 or something. That's kind of the idea of this shape too, right? This clears any front cross members or steering that you have in the car.
Yep.
If a Chevy small block fits in it, this will fit in it.
Yep. There you go.
This is also in Eddie's Mustang, correct?
This is
Yeah.
true. This particular setup is in the dock, the 65 Mustang. It was under the hood of the HBD, and we had, what, 8 cars at SEMA that had some version of this in it.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
The G-Wagons, there's four-wheel drive stuff, there's a Miata. The Miata's going to be stupid.
Yeah,
The
so
Miata's gonna be
I
too
can't wait to see the torque trans Miata. That thing is going to be just wicked fast. Yeah, we have E-Muscle Car guys in Texas. They have a 68 convertible Camaro.
Well, the fastest car on the planet with electric motor has one
Hey.
of these in it. Well, 2 of them in it.
Yeah, the fastest electric car in the world is the Little Giant, the 444 car, and it has 2 of these in it.
So once again, this kit is more design. Everyone's like, oh yeah, it's so expensive. But look, it's a showstopper, it's show quality, and you're not gonna have to cut up your classic, and it's minimally invasive to what you have to do to get this motor into the engine bay.
What are some of the advantages of using your system here with Tim Allen's Vik?
Well, for instance, with Tim's car, it is a 34 Ford Victoria. This was hand restored and built. There's not a lot of Bondo underneath here. We've actually seen this car completely stripped. You guys can too. Tim Allen has a channel that's dedicated to this car. There's like 250 episodes on this entire vehicle, from body work to chassis work to all of it. We don't want to cut this car apart. Put a transaxle in here. It's just not going to fit. These cars are pretty small. You lose the whole back seat, and where do you put batteries? So yes, you could put all the batteries and load it up front. Tim is a car collector. He has some very beautiful cars. Snow and I were up there not too long ago taking a look at his stuff, and it would be a shame not to show something pretty on the hood. One thing that I don't like about EVs, and this kind of goes for all of us, what happens when you open the hood of an EV? Boring. You see a frunk. When you open the hood of a car like this, especially with this car, it's got the little doors on the side. You could take them off, you could showcase the whole entire vehicle, but that's kind of the premise, and what we're all about is it's not just performance, which we have the highest performing motor, but it's about aesthetics. It's got to look good. Hot rodding is about making cars faster, cooler, and there's a visual side of that too. You go to any car show, what do people have open on their car? The hoods. And what do people stand around? The engine bay. We wanted that same effect. We wanted to bring back that, nostalgic type of fun to the EV side of things. So that's why we did this to this vehicle, and that's why we get repeat customers and other customers coming to us, because they want that show quality look, they want high performance, and they want to keep the nostalgia of the hot rod, of popping the hood and talking about your vehicle.
And especially if you know anything about Tim Allen, or even have watched Home Improvement ever, you know that this, his background with the cars, he wants it to be what it is. All right, so let's go take a look at how your engine fits in that bay.
Cool.
So this is the crate motor that you were just looking at, except this one's been painted. We wanted to give it a little something extra. This is pinstripe by Hot Dog Customs, which is it's gorgeous. I love the color on it. But as far as fitting it in the engine bay, it mounts up just like any other motor, really. You got the 2 side mounts like you'd have on any V8, and then a Turbo 400 transmission mount on Torque Box.
So 4 bolts basically holds in the whole entire motor. Pretty easy to fabricate for most of you that do your own fabrication. This could go in about a weekend.
Oh yeah.
It's not hard to do, and then you set your pinion angles and you're good to go. If you have a 4-link, it's even easier, because then you could adjust the rear end. But we usually slide this motor further back into the tunnel. For this particular build, we wanted to showcase the motor because these sides will open, and you'll be able to see through the back of the wheel here. So we wanted to slide the motor out a little bit further to show people, what's going on underneath the hood, especially with this style of vehicle, being able to not only see from the top down, but from the sides as well. Our kits are fully plug and play, so you drop it in, you add 400 volts, step on the throttle pedal, and hold on for dear life.
I mean, that's the last stage of testing for you, right, Snow? There's a 400 volt battery under that bench.
That's right.
It gets unplugged from that battery, put on a crate, and if you've got a 400 volt battery at your end when you receive the package, you'd have the thing running in, what do you think, 15 minutes?
Yeah, max,
Yeah.
15 minutes.
I mean, Snow too, when you test it here, you use the wiring harness, the throttle pedal, and everything, all the MCUs and everything else that come with our kit is all tested together as a whole.
That's important.
And we actually videotape everything too to make sure everything's working, and then we send it out to the client to make sure everything's fine.
What we're doing mostly is making sure that all the gauges are working properly. And
we're watching voltages and making sure things go up and down correctly. I'm trying to drain the pack on the car so we can do another full charge cycle. So we have some data to compare up against where it is at full, where it's bottom, make sure all the gauges here are lining up correctly on the top of the charge and the low part of the state of charge. And then all the voltages kind of line up too. So this is more of, car shooken down, from a mechanical standpoint. Now we're just making sure that all the gauges and everything else is working properly. Plus, power cycling the car is really good for it. You want to make sure there's no little gremlins left behind.
And we also get views like this.
Not a bad place to go cruising, huh?
All right.
If you are going to be doing these type of conversion and everything else, testing is a big one. Like I mentioned earlier in the video, this car's been running for the entire week. Even when we're inside, we turn the car on, make sure the pumps are working, the radiator fans. I even set all the temperatures down really low. Yesterday, this fan was turning on and off all day long for 8 hours. We want to make sure that the thermistors are cycling correctly, that the fans are kicking in, the relays are working right. We know they work, but let's make sure and triple check it. And by doing those types of things, you'll be able to dive in, and there's always a gotcha. Like we've always had, we've done this a lot of times, and even now, there's something that rears its ugly head at you.
Something you haven't thought of.
Yep, like we had a manifold that was cracked.
Yep.
For cooling the other day, caused a leak in the car. Not that big of a deal, but yeah, that was like 3 or 4 hours of fixing because you had to get to it. I had to weld it. It had to go back in. We had to purge the system again. Those types of things will run away on you. That was a 5-minute fix that took 4 hours.
Yeah. Well, the weld took you what, 30 seconds?
Yeah, and then I think you went home covered in oil one night.
Yeah, I went home and covered in oil 2 nights. Taking it out one night, putting it back in the next.
So, Maddie, do you want to kind of talk about the wiring that you had to do for this vehicle? Which is all of it. I mean, besides the turn signals and stuff like that, Maddie basically wired all the high voltage, all the BMSs, all the VCUs, CCUs, all that stuff.
It's a lot of copper.
All right, Maddie, so what do we have going on back here?
This is kind of the AEM suite that we have. This is becoming standard for our shop builds. It's just a really nice way to locate your components. Obviously, your brains are the operations of ECU. This is your charger, takes the AC out of your wall in the house, turns it into DC for your batteries. It also, CCU's combined charging unit, so it also acts like an alternator. So it takes your high voltage and converts that to 12 volts, well, 14 volts for your whole charging system, to run your lights, your radio, stuff like that. So I thought I'd kind of give you a rundown on what all this stuff is and how it interacts with each other. So let's say you turn your key on to go and drive. This would turn your contactors on. This would turn your alternator on, if you like, your DC to DC. And then these 3 are battery management systems. This is actually 3 of 6. There's 6 of these in the car total. Each of these is responsible for 3 battery modules. And then your PDU here will drive things like your cooling fans, your cooling pumps, any other accessories that you want controlled by your VCU. This will turn on. So that's driving. With charging, everything kind of works backwards. So you plug in your J7072 plug at the front, or whatever plug it is that you have. That is picked up by the BMS, the master BMS, sends a wake signal to the VCU. VCU turns the charger on. And obviously all your BMSs are getting monitored for temperature and voltage as this is happening. And your PDU, the second you plug it in, is going to turn your battery pump on, and it'll turn your fan on if it gets too hot. That's pretty much the overview of this suite back here.
Was there anything special in the way you had to put it in this particular car, or is this a plug-and-play arrangement for any of the vehicles?
This AEM does sell a harness, which is fine, and it's really nice if you're going to let that harness kind of dictate where your components go. For us, we like to put the components back here. We think it's a great display of it. It lets you run all your cables all nice and neat. So for ours, we make our own harnesses. So it's not as plug and play as it would be, but that's, once we've got a formula, we can crank those out.
All right, so is there anything specific about how this fits with this build, or can this be put in any car this way?
It's pretty, for a ReVolt build, it's pretty universal. So wherever you put these components, as long as your cables reach to them, it is plug and play. And we have a standard firmware flash that we use for these. So none of this worked. Nothing even knew what car it was in. None of the batteries knew what they were doing. Eddie B plugs his laptop in, puts the firmware flash on it that we had in the Mustang, and bang, everything runs.
All right, so this is all AAM gear, but this is ReVolt's configuration?
Yes. So this panel was specifically designed not for this car, but for our recipe. So in any ReVolt car, you're going to see this particular panel. And with that comes a certain amount of, the holes had to be in the right locations. These components have to be in the same spot every time. And Eddie B, he's got a new printer, so he's like a kid with a new toy. So if you look at this, notice the cables are all nice and neat. And this is designed to simulate a production situation. I worked for a long time in the semiconductor industry, and one of the big things that we did is everything looks the same, everything's nice and neat. So we try to have the same, lengths, cables laid out nicely, and ADB designed and printed these clips and locking mechanisms to hold everything in place. So, and also, I think you may have got a shot of it, but if you look under the steering column there's a 3D printed switch. What is it, the brake switch? Yep. The 3D printed holder for the brake switch. So a lot of this stuff, there's certain capabilities that maybe every shop doesn't have, but with our shop, this makes a really nice package because we can add these little accents to clean it all up.
Awesome. All right, guys, so we have something else that you guys make here besides just the motor, right?
Yeah, so we just released our brand new contactor box. So this is the ReVolt contactor box. And the reason we decided to build one is we didn't really like anybody else's. Sorry, guys. And we also wanted something that's more universal with positive and negative contactors inside of it, and something that's a little bit more robust for the amperage and power demands that we have here at ReVolt Systems. As you guys know, we don't do your typical daily drivers. We do a lot of race stuff and things that require higher current, higher amperage. And like everything else here, I'm a sucker for billet. I wanted to build a box. I know it's overkill, but it's just one more piece of hot rodding for the EV hot rodding stuff that we offer that will look really good as a gym inside your car. We do already have a couple vehicles running around with these contactor boxes in it. There was one actually two at SEMA.
There's two at SEMA, yeah.
Yeah, two at SEMA. We had so we had Mitch's Miata, and that thing
G-Wagon.
And a G-Wagon. And they had it like kind of underneath the hood in a very beautiful place and looked really good. The G-Wagon actually put our logo on it upside down, which I thought was pretty cool because it's kind of an R. So hey, it's ambidextrous. There you go both ways. But let's take a look at the inside of it here. As I said, it's all made out of 6000 series aluminum. It's all billet. It also has an IP64 rating on it. We pay attention a lot to quality and how we build things. So as you can see, everything's been rubber O-ringed, keeps the dust and moisture out of the box. Inside, we have a whole suite of basically everything you're going to need for an EV. Now, this thing's pretty expensive. It runs about $6,000. Everyone's like, oh my gosh. This will save you a minimum of 100 to 150 hours.
Oh, yeah.
If you've never done this, probably even more.
Oh, easily. I'd say if you know what you're doing, it'll save you 100 easily, and if you don't, it's going to save you 300.
Yeah. The contactor boxes, especially one to this level, they get quite intricate with what's inside of them, how things are done. Plus, we've been doing this for a while. We know what size bus bars to put in here. Everything in here is rated up to 600 volts, so it can handle all the current and voltage you're going to throw at it. Also, this will handle 1500 amps. Let's take a look at some of the inside componentry so you guys know exactly what's going on in here.
So you mentioned the positive and negative contactors. So that's right here. You got GV200 gigawatt contactors. These are the best that we've found in the years that we've been doing it. They can handle over 2000 amps for short bursts, so they're super robust and they're economized too. Same goes for these, the accessory contactors. These would run, for example, your high voltage air conditioning, cabin heat, battery heat, whatever it is you want to run, you can run it through these. These are also economized, so the box doesn't just get cooking hot.
Yeah, so let's touch about what economized means. Economized means that when you run 12 volts to them, they'll draw a quick little amp burst to throw the contactor, and once the contactor is in its place, the current draw goes much further down. There are a lot of non-economized contactors, and if you just put 12 volt to them, like you just said, they get hot. And they'll keep drawing that 12 volt off, and
You'll
they'll
blow some of them up.
Oh, we had one back in the back cooking the other day. I couldn't even grab it.
Yeah.
So once again, economized contactors are really big for this type of configuration.
Yeah. And then all of these, obviously, if you're going to run your high voltage air conditioning or whatever through them, you're going to need it fused. So that's what we have here is the bank of fuses. You got your 1, 2, and 3 accessory fuses. and then you got DC-DC, so this is like your alternator. That'll run about 3 kilowatts out of that if you had something that big hooked up to it. And then we got provisions for 2 chargers. So each one of these you can run a 6.6 charger through. All of your ins and outs come through these, again, IP rated connectors, so the accessories and chargers on these. All the coil control is through this 19-pin barrel plug, and you get high and low coil control. So whether you want to switch to ground or switch to power, you can pick whatever. Like Eddie said, this is as universal as we can make it. Another thing we got in here is the whole pre-charge circuit. So these are made by TE, and it's an automotive specific high voltage pre-charge relay, which is really nice because until this came out, I don't think there was one on the market in a standard relay, form factor. There's your resistor. It's got a current sensor in it. You don't have to run this. If you want to run a Hall effect outside the box, you can still do that, but this is a CAN-controlled current sensor or current shunt that will integrate with your BMS, VCU, whatever it is you want to integrate with, and main pack fuse too. It's nice to run another one, in the middle of your pack to split the voltage in half, but this is everything you need and nothing you don't.
Yeah, and having the control of positive and negative contactors really helps too. And the CAN channel, so that works with all the AM systems and everything else. I think they primarily use with the IVTS shunts as well. So if you guys are running the AM controls or any of that type of VCU, this will work perfectly with this contactor. Once again, it's universal. You could use it for your 150 volt systems all the way up to 600 volts. So anyway, on the exterior too, besides all the billet, we did build in some strain relief for the 2-aught cables. So that is right here. You can see this comes apart, so you could clamp your cables in there.
Yeah,
one thing I noticed about some of the other contactor boxes I used in the past is once this goes onto the contactor box, you have your giant 2-aught cables hanging off of it. It puts a lot of strain on this plastic. So what we decided to do is encompass this strain relief. Mine's under the dash of the Mustang. I get passengers coming in. Sometimes people put their feet up a little too far and could grab one of the 2-aught cables. Strain reliefs kind of help with that situation.
Oh, yeah.
So we kind of try to think of everything with this, and we hope you guys like it. So far, we've got it in all of our builds here, and it's performed flawlessly, and it's, like I said before, extremely universal.
You mentioned up to 600 volts. Why did you stop there at 600?
Well, 600 volt is pretty much a cap for most UL ratings for like wires. If you go past 600 volts, UL rating changes dramatically, and the cost of everything goes up quite a bit. That's why you see a lot of the OEs were kind of hanging out a little bit lower. Now with the Cybertruck being 800 volts, I think Taycan's 800 volts. But what they're having to do with those vehicles is step up a lot of their wiring. You can't just go in there. Most wires will be rated to about 600 volts. After that, it becomes a little dicey, a lot more.
As well as those are the high-end cars, the 800 volt ones right now. We'll see the prices come down as that stuff gets more common, but right now that's where we're at.
Yeah, just the componentry in this thing alone is in the thousands and thousands of dollars. If you guys want to go out and price this yourself, price out all this stuff, go ahead, and you'll see why we're charging so much for this box. Our profits are actually pretty low on this because of the amount of labor that goes into it, the billet boxes. But it's one of those products that we thought that you guys need and we needed so badly that I decided to go like, okay, let's pull the trigger on this, let's get it done. Because even if, it's not a huge moneymaker for us, but it saves us hundreds of hours with every single one of our builds, and it's going to save you guys the same amount.
And then also support too with the motors. If you sell a motor and a contactor box to somebody, you know exactly how to hook it up. It's one of those, you get a phone call, hey, I can't get this contactor control. Well, we know how it's hooked up. We can walk you through exactly how to hook it up, rather than, what system do you have? How are you controlling this contactor? And it streamlines the whole thing.
We're trying to go as close to turnkey as possible, and this definitely helped us with our kit as well. So it's awesome.
Yeah, and this is also in Tim Allen's car, right?
Correct. This is Tim Allen's car. We got another one going in the Mustang. We got one in Mitch's car. We got one on that G-Wagon. So, and there was
one more.
We got like 5 of them going out.
Right there.
You'll see them in all sorts of builds.
Awesome.
Cool.
Okay, gentlemen, where are we now?
We are inside the Vik. It's kind of small. The headroom is low with the chop. It's pretty aggressive.
It's a good chop.
It's a nice chop. It's really coming together though. So Will from Buckwire just put the gauge cluster in today, and it looks just fantastic. I mean, you'll see the the sweep on this thing and the illumination.
Oh, that's cool.
You hear everything self-test.
I love those red.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's nice, huh?
I try to keep it like more period appropriate too, or correct, I should say.
yeah.
So the more of the yellowish but brown tones and
Yeah.
the old school needles.
He didn't want to see any, iPads or anything on display when he's driving the car, and I'm totally behind that. This one is kind of iPad-ish, you see that, but it's mocked up. We're waiting on a smaller one. This is going to be closed inside the glove compartment. So if you needed to, I don't know, if you're curious as to how your battery pack was going, how many amps you're pulling down from a charger, whatever it is, you can just come over here and pick that information right up.
Yeah, this is an AMCD7. Obviously, it doesn't really fit in here. We have this thing temporarily mounted so I could see what's going on with the vehicle. We do have a CD5 that fits perfectly in the inside.
But it's not here yet.
It's not here yet. So we have one that doesn't work that we put in there for mock-up. But this gives me, once again, all the telemetry. I programmed a lot of the stuff on these screens. AM did as well. So, and then I put a bunch of my own things and that I want to know about the car. If there is an issue with the vehicle, I don't want my client calling me going, I have no idea what's going on. Hey, open up your glove box, take a screenshot for me, and send me a photo of what's here.
Yeah.
I'll be able to tell if there's a BMS fault or maybe something's out of range. I could see where the deltas on the pack voltages are. We could scroll through a couple different screens, and it gives you basically all the cells. If there's something red, we know there's something wrong. We're testing some things here. I can see all my cell tap voltages, and if there's some charging going on, I can see how many amps we're drawing. We're doing 0.2 right now with the car at idle. So once again, this is more for troubleshooting versus display. As I said, this customer did not want to have any displays in this car. So once again, this will be behind the glove box. But if I need to hear something, I need to see something, also this does all our data logging. AM does have a couple different flavors of these displays. This particular one has an L. If you see an L, that means logging. So it basically logs everything in the car. Something goes wrong, then I can see it on the screen. If I have to dive in deeper, I can say, look, we have a USB plug in this car. Let me pull all the information off the data logger. And then I could really get into like, wow, look, we're having a problem with this battery or this temperature, or it's not charging correctly.
Yeah. Speaking of, what would you say are the most important things in the car? Because obviously you got more information than you'd ever want over here. We had a lot of back and forth as to which gauges we wanted to have in front of the driver. And we decided that, well, state of charge is an obvious one. This is all CAN driven, by the way, from the VCU. None of this is off of analog sensors. So even though they're analog needles, they're being driven by stepper motors. So you got your battery level calculated by the VCU. Battery temperature is obviously very important. I don't know, if you hooked a trailer up to this thing and tried to toast them up the grapevine in the middle of summer, maybe you see that gauge start to creep up and you'd want to, back off a little. But the other ones are amps and voltage. This is my favorite one. I had to fight to get them to put this one in. The amps meter. When you hit the gas, it's gonna,
Hit the what?
When you hit the accelerator, this thing, you'll know how much. It's like a horsepower meter almost.
No, I actually agree with you completely. And so I like to know DC amps, not AC amps. Because on the AC side, the motor's going to try to pull as many amps as it can through the AC, and it's just regulating voltage on the inverter to get you your speed that you want to get up to. On the DC side, you see a different number. So when you apply throttle, you'll see the DC bus come up and that amperage drop. That's what I want to see.
Yeah.
Because the DC side tells me how much I'm taxing my batteries. The weak point is always in these systems is mostly the batteries. You want to make sure you're not draining them too fast. The C rating is in where they're designed to do. And if I'm pulling more amperage than the battery or bus bars were designed to push, then you can start cooking things. Once again, love that gauge too. That's one of my favorite gauges in my car. I have a LCD display in my car. The biggest gauge on there is my amp meter.
That would get me in so much trouble. I'd be trying to peg the thing out at 12.
Oh, I do.
Every on-ramp.
I'm like, I hit 13, 13.5, 13.8. And it depends on,
That's what's nice about a CAN-driven current sensor, though,
Yep.
is that it can, inside a contactor box, is one of these current shunts. The
IVTS.
Yep. It just communicates right with the VCU, so you can pull the data right off of here, or whatever system you need to read that. It'll just read it right out of there.
Big thing, like current is like RPM. I think that correlates perfectly because in a gas engine, you don't want to hit red line because you're going to blow your car or your motor up. Here, we don't want to over current things because you're going to destroy batteries, you're going to overheat things.
So the temperatures are obviously, we want to know what temps are, but our biggest factor is how many DC amps are we pulling from the batteries. That is the most crucial number that I could think of. As this motor will spin up to 16,000 RPM. RPMs don't mean anything to me, and since it's a direct drive, RPMs will always going to correlate with speed. So if you know where your RPMs are based on your speed, you can actually put them all on the same needle.
You just have two needles moving the same. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. And voltage, like say, even if you're at 320 volts, it would just mean that for the same power, you need more amps.
Correct. Yep.
And all of this is super crucial because this is not just any old conversion. This is meant to be performance built for a very performance-minded customer, which leads to battery cooling. A lot of conversions don't have cooling, but you guys have
full battery cooling.
You can see a lot of that down here, actually, how tight a lot of this was to get in. So you got your, obviously high voltage DC lines, and then there's 3 modules in this box right here under the floor, under the seats. And you have, obviously, your high pressure in on one side, your low pressure out on the other side. So that, guess whose skinny hands had to get in here?
Not mine.
No.
So how many modules are inside the cabin here?
Inside the cabin, you got 3 here, and 1 in front of the package tray. And then you got 6 in the trunk and 3 up front. I think that adds up to 16, right? Did I miss any?
Math.
And also some more of the BMSs are in here.
Yep. So each one of these is responsible for its, respective box, and then same goes for the front. Under the scuttle panel there, you'll see another BMS.
And then with the AEM VCUs, they do 18S a piece. So we will bridge out and try to fill them as much as we can within reason to get the full 18S into each one of these. That is an odd number when it comes to like 6S and everything else. So we do have some leftover taps. This particular BMS system can handle more than 400 volts or 96S in this particular set.
That's the red lights, the red cells that you saw earlier were those left over in that BMS that's only handling 6 cells. So you see that this BMS right here is only handling 6, and then the rest are not connected because, like I say, it's an odd number. We got to reconfigure that screen for the setup that we have.
Yep. This is kind of a generic one that we know that, okay, we're kind of looking good, and we could cycle through some of these things. So it's pretty simple. This is kind of what I have in front of my Mustang is I have current, I have voltage, I also have torque, and then I always want to know where my temp mins and max are. So when you guys are putting these cars together, always have a temp min and max on your displays because you want to know where the lowest pack is and the highest pack of the thermistors are sitting, especially when you have batteries spread around the car. For instance, my Mustang has batteries in front and then batteries under the seat, kind of like this. The front ones get the most amount of airflow. So they're exposed to the outside elements the most. And I'll notice my front pack during winter is a lot cooler than my rear pack by about 5 or 6 degrees C, which is a huge spread. You turn on the pumps and then that will basically spread the load out. We do recommend putting some sort of active cooling in the batteries, not just because you want to cool the batteries, is because you want your batteries all to be the same temperature. If you do have one battery that is warmer or colder than the rest of the pack significantly, the internal resistance will change.
Pretty dramatically too.
Crazy.
You get a battery down to, let's say it's a cold morning, it's 5 degrees C outside, like that, your performance will be significantly different out of the cold battery than it would out of one that's at room temperature.
Exactly. And on top of that, when you start to run these cars, so if I look here and go, oh yeah, my average pack is, 25 C, but one of them's sitting at, 10 degrees or 5 degrees C less. When I drive the car, the electrons from the colder pack are going to travel slower than the ones in the higher pack. So now you're unbalancing your pack because of the heat changes. So that's very crucial to know where your packs are sitting when we test these cars too. In this video, you'll see that we actually put a heat gun on the radiator that cools the whole entire battery system. We watch to make sure that everything's coming up at the same level and dropping at the same level.
So it's pretty crude, but what we're doing right now is we're testing the thermal management system of the batteries. We have a heat gun pointed at the radiator that cools the batteries. But since it's cold outside, I'm trying to heat the pack up a little bit to make sure everything's stable. So we just plumb the whole entire battery system. And what I'm doing is I'm trying to pay attention to the actual numbers. I got basically my AAM interface here, and it shows me every single module that we have in this particular car. And they all start at 18C. And as you can see, they're climbing up. I got one at 20, and the rest of them are all kind of sitting at 18. We have a few at 20. So over the last 5 minutes, they've gone up about 2 degrees Celsius. And as long as they're all kind of coming up together at the same rate, I know if the fluid is being distributed amongst the car and all the cells evenly. If we had one side or a cell that was sitting low and not changing much, I know either we got an air pocket or something wrong with the cooling system, a kink in the hose. But what this is showing me is flow. I can't test flow at every single level or every single module. So I'm using, temperature sensors to add heat to the system to see where things actually balance out at. It's super simple. It's kind of crude, but this will give you real results because what we're trying to make sure of is one cell doesn't get hotter than the other if the cooling system's open and flowing properly. So that's basically what we're doing, geeking out in some weird, strange ways.
You don't want a mismatch. Once again, you're going to start frying packs and degrading certain cells faster. And then you have BMS issues. You could be chasing balancing all day long. That becomes very crucial in these types of builds. And that's what people completely forget is, just put batteries places. And they're kind of the same battery. They'll work. No,
underestimate battery management at your peril.
Exactly.
I'd say that's if a project stalls out, that's where it's going to stall out, is on battery boxes and battery management. That's the bulk of most builds, I would say.
Yeah, especially with all the recent news in the industry, you want to make sure we're really taking care of our batteries.
Oh, yeah.
If we catch on, with an ICE catching on fire, it's like, yeah, dude, you caught on fire. If we catch on fire, it's like, look at those EV idiots, and it just goes crazy. One of the biggest things I was concerned about at Bonneville when we ran the speed record is I didn't really care about breaking the record. I mean, sure, that's the goal, but my number one concern was this thing better not catch on fire. That battery box was overbuilt. The second one was just... massive.
Oh, yeah. Bus bars 1/4 inch thick. Yeah.
Exactly. Big old fat ones. We had 5,000 pounds of, $5,000 worth of just copper in the battery box. Thank you, Send Cut Send. You guys rock. They actually hooked us up with that, which is amazing. But once again, batteries. You cannot stress enough on just the simplest things. Like I just said, here in Southern California, we don't really need to heat or cool our batteries too much. It doesn't get that cold, especially with a vehicle like this that sits indoors when it's parked. But once again, you want to spread that temperature out evenly. Even if they're all cold or all warm, it's better if all your batteries are at the same and your delta V's are as little as possible and delta T's. So that's going to help as well. So keep your temperatures spread as close to, to each other as you possibly can.
Yeah, very, very smart. While we're down here, do you want to talk about this brake switch you were talking about the other day?
Oh, yeah. We got a light in there. So we're still tying up some cables, so excuse that. But yeah, this we could not figure out how we were going to mount the brake switch onto this. And then Eddie B got his new toy, his new printer. I gotta make one. So you'd adjust the throw on this by obviously sliding this up and down the column, which is, kind of beautifully simple. And as you hit the brake, you probably hear the pump kick on because it doesn't have vacuum brakes. Oh no, it didn't.
There's the little switch, and that sits right on the brake switch there, or the brake pedal bracket.
So that drives your regen. It will tune your regen down as you brake, so that you're not, getting a huge brake imbalance, and it will also drive your brake lights and all the rest of it.
And one quick safety tip too, when I first installed this system in my Mustang, and I'm going to just throw this out there, I did not install a brake switch in my car. The VCU and the EV controls unit we use to actually drive these motors requires a brake pedal input before you could put it into gear. So I cheated, and we put a momentary switch up on my dash. That's the brake on, brake off.
Because we were busy for a show or something, whatever it was.
Plus, I like doing burnouts, and if you do depress the brake in these vehicles, it actually limits the amount of torque that the motor could put out, and that's a safety feature. So if you double pedal your car on accident, it happens to people all the time. They'll step on the brake and the throttle pedal, and the car will lunge forward. Yeah. The brakes should override. Most of the time, an IC engine.
And there's ways around that. If you want a burnout machine, there's ways around that. You can have a burnout button that interrupts signal, but
exactly. But
in your case,
in my case, I did that on purpose because I didn't. We just ran out of time.
It must be the day before a show or something. Yeah.
We didn't install the brake switch. So what happened is I was actually going and taking my kid to school. I had the app on my phone. I put the phone on my lap. We're doing about 25, 30 miles an hour. There's a cruise control button in there, touch screen, and it depressed, and I didn't notice. I was coming up to a stop sign at a hard T with a house on the other side of a small cliff. Well, I hit the brakes and the car just didn't feel like stopping. And I literally stood on those brakes. The front wheels are locked up. There's still about a 50-foot skid mark by my house.
Is that 1,000 pound-feet of torque or 900 odd
It was
pound-feet of torque?
600 Newton meters.
Is what it was putting down.
It was putting down because luckily I had logging going at the same time. So I reached down. The first thing I did is turn off the key. So when you guys are building these things, make sure your key turns off all your contactors. That is your safety switch if something goes wrong. Now, the first thing I did is turn the car off. I was fine. That could have ended in a disaster. So when you guys are building these vehicles, make sure you put a provision in there, because every human being that drives a car, what's the first thing they do when something goes wrong? They hit that thing, which is the brake. That should always be in there, and it should interrupt your high voltage in a way, or your motor in a way, the controller, to say, hey, do not give me full torque anymore, no matter what's going on.
Yep.
And that's why I love the OE stuff.
As a side note, actually, speaking of killing contactors,
Yep.
a very good idea, I'd call it essential personally.
It is essential
to have a fireman's loop. So this interrupts your contactors. If you're in some situation where, for some reason, the key doesn't turn it off, for some reason, your high voltage switch doesn't turn it off, you're in this 1 in a million scenario. If you cut this wire, this is the main power to the contact coils. If this is cut, there is no way your car can run, like physically.
Tesla actually, and a lot of the EVs,
every OE has this.
they have to have these.
Yeah.
Now
So this is going to be tucked somewhere obvious where you can get to it.
yeah, there's one underneath the hood of a Model S, I know, up in the right-hand corner by the passenger side. Also in the little runners right here, if the firemen come in and are trying to cut you out of the car, there is a sticker cut here. What that means to the firefighters is if they cut along that line, it actually has that fireman's loop inside of it, and it severs that, disabling the contactors off the main pack. So there's no more high voltage going through any of these yellow cables. So that is essential. And
It's a bad day if you need it, but it's an even worse day if you don't have it.
well put.
Awesome. Well, it sounds like you guys are very mindful of safety and performance all at the same time.
You have to be. They go hand in hand. I mean, the reason the safety stuff is there is because people have gotten killed or hurt, and we don't want that. Especially, this is a very fresh industry. You guys, look, everyone's watching us, and you guys, you mess up this EV stuff, it just gives the other side way more ammunition to come after us. So we want this. Plus, I don't want to get hurt. You don't want to get hurt.
Nope.
And the last thing I want to see is one of my friends killed or somebody killed with this stuff. I want this to be fun, exciting. We're doing this for one reason only, is performance, and that's it. We want that torque. We want that just this feeling is exhilarating. And let's keep doing it, but let's do it in a safe manner.
Awesome. All right, guys, thank you so much. I mean, we really went down some rabbit holes on that one, and I think over at Renew, we're going to love that. So thanks for watching Out of Spec Renew. This has been ReVolt Systems here in Oceanside, and hopefully soon this car will finally be on the road. It's been many years, and it's going to be finishing up with you guys. So great guys, and stay tuned for the next one.
It's going to
All right,
soon too.
coming.
All right, thanks, guys. Yeah.
All right.